Chris Norcross is an academic technology systems administrator at Palomar College.
Okay, so as Michelle said, I'm at Palomar College as an academic technology systems administrator. A big part of my job is just maintaining some of the servers and websites we have here on campus. But the other part of my job, which I really enjoy, is basically training faculty and staff how to use technology. I love any new software tool that's available, and Wolfram Alpha is a good example of that. It's a brand new breed of tool, something that really didn't exist before it came around. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, really what it is it's just a website. It's in its most basic description is it's a website. It's developed by Wolfram Research, who are also the developers of the Mathematica software. And so anybody who's in the math discipline probably is familiar with Mathematica. Also, a lot of other sciences, of course, use Mathematica. I won't be talking about that software application, but just know that's kind of where this website comes from. It actually does use Mathematica behind the scenes in a way. And the website of Wolfram Alpha really is fairly new. It came into existence in May 2009 for the public, so it's only been around for a little over a year. And it's something that I've seen a lot of mentions about it in the press, especially when it first was released. And then by the end of December of 2009, Popular Science magazine named it the best of what's new for technology. So that gave it a big boost. A lot of people found out about it from that. But one thing I've found is that a lot of people have heard of it, but they've never actually used it. Or if they have used it, they've tried it once or twice, had a little trouble figuring out what they can actually do with it, and then never went back to it. So my goal here is to make sure that you guys all, first of all, know what it is and what it can do, but also I want to give you a good sense of how you can use it. Now, Wolfram Alpha covers a lot of territory. It has data on that spans many, many disciplines. So I won't be spending too much time on any one particular subject. So for those of you who are from a math background, they're looking for a lot of math information, I'll be covering some of the math stuff, but I won't be spending too much time on it, mainly because I want to do something that's kind of more generally, general information for people, from all disciplines. So just keep that in mind. If I give your particular subject short shrift, then that's the reason why. But what I will show you how you can get more information about using Wolfram Alpha, how you can see examples of using it within your own subject. So I'll give you the information you need. Now, one common misconception about Wolfram Alpha is that it's a search engine. I've had people ask me, well, why should I use Wolfram Alpha instead of Google or Yahoo or whatever? And the answer is that it's actually something completely different. You would never want to use it instead of Google or something like that. In fact, Wolfram Research themselves, they refer to it as a computational knowledge engine, whatever that means. I like to refer to it as an answer engine. In other words, you type in a query and it gives you back a single answer. Now, in addition to the answer it also gives you a lot of background information. But the big difference between what it can do in a normal search engine such as Google is that Google really just grabs a collection of materials that are available on the web publicly and presents them to you in an ordered list, ranking the most appropriate ones at the top. While what Wolfram Alpha does is something different. You ask it a specific question or for a specific fact, and it is going to give you back a specific answer, not a collection of links to websites where you may find that answer. So that's a significant difference, and you'll see that'll be obvious once we begin using it here. So that's the kind of the story about what Wolfram Alpha is, and kind of a little bit about how it started. But the main point here is to show you how to use it. So we're going to actually I'm just going to go ahead and just start demonstrating using Wolfram Alpha right from the browser. So for anybody who wants to actually try it themselves, all you would ever have to do is browse to the appropriate website. So in this case, it's www.wolframalpha.com. So it's a completely freely available website. You just browse there, and you can immediately begin querying. It's free for personal use, and there are certain things you can pay for, but I've found that for most users, they would never ever need to pay for anything related to Wolfram Alpha. But I'll talk about some of the other things you can do that do cost money, but they're things that most people won't need. So I'll get to that later. So I'm going to go ahead and share my my browser now so that you can see. Okay, so hopefully you guys are able to see the browser window that I have open here. And basically what we have is just a query box, kind of like what you would see if you were to go to Google.com. They keep it nice and simple. They kind of follow that Google mentality of just keep it simple. And so we have the query box with a few links to additional information. Now, there are many examples that they have here. In fact, you can see below the query box they have this examples by topic. I'll show that to you guys a little bit later, but for now I want to get started with just some very simple queries so I can just give you an idea of how it works. So let's start out with the most obvious use of Wolfram Alpha. Like I said, a lot of people here are probably from the math departments at your various colleges, is my guess. And then some other sciences, chemistry, physics, engineering. I find a lot of people who know about it and use it are from those disciplines. And it's certainly very useful for those subjects, but there are many other uses that may not be really common. So I'm going to go ahead and just get into just a kind of the basic use of it first, and then we'll get into some of kind of surveying some of the topics you can use Wolfram Alpha for. So, for example, if I want to focus on math, I can just type in a simple math equation. So, for instance, 2 plus 2, and then I can either hit Enter or click on the little equal sign to the right of the query box. So that's all there is to performing a query. So that's easy. I'm sure most of you are used to doing that kind of thing in any search engine. Now, once I put in the query and hit the equal button or Enter, it's going to present me with my answer. But before it gives me an answer, it's going to tell me how it has interpreted my input. So it says here that my input was 2 plus 2. Now that's a very straightforward one, so it was able to easily interpret it. And then right below that, it gives me the result. So now I see that 2 plus 2, the result is 4. In addition to giving the numeric result there, it also gives the name and also a visual representation of that number. So it gives you some other really useful information. But generally, what we're looking for here is just, of course, the result. So let's do something a little more complicated now. That was, obviously a very simple one. So I'm going to do something a little more complicated. I'm going to say, how about $250 plus 15%?
Not so much now.
And I'll just hit Enter.
There.
Okay, and now we see that the interpretation interpreted $250 US. It makes that assumption, and it will make assumptions based on your geographic area where you're from. So that's useful. In other words, if I was in the UK doing this search, then it would give me different interpretation than doing it here in the US. And the same thing, if I were in Japan, it would give me, their monetary format. So it's kind of nice. But anyways, and then it adds the 15% and gives me the result. So that one again is a very simple example, but pretty, a pretty good representation of certain things you can do and the assumptions it makes. On to now do some more advanced math, and this is stuff that if you're not interested in math, and you may not be too interested in this, but I want to give some more complicated examples so that we can see a little more of what Wolfram Alpha can really do and why it's such a powerful website to use, a powerful tool to use. So let's do something like let's see here. Let's say solve 3x squared, and I'm just using pretty standard notation here, using that caret symbol. You can see it there between the x and the 2. That's to represent So I'm going to do 3x squared plus 7x minus 10, and then hit Enter. So here's a little more of a complicated equation, of course, an algebraic equation that it gives me the interpretation, which is pretty straightforward, sets it equal to 0, and then gives me the result. So I see my answer. So x equals negative 10 over 3 or x equals 1. And then also below, you see that it gives actually it graphs those 2 points on down below there. Now that's very useful information. But what's even more useful is if you look at the results box over on the right-hand side, there's the Show Steps link. The Show Steps link, if you click on it, it will actually give you all the intermediate steps to solve that particular equation. So that's something that goes beyond what any normal website would do. For example, if you were to go to Google and type in 2 plus 2, it would give you the answer 4. But you can't type in a complicated algebraic equation and get the answer, and also get the steps that are required to complete it. So that's an example of how it can be very, very useful for math. I found that a lot of our math tutors here at the college are using it as a tool for themselves. They will literally have students come in with math problems they don't know how to do, the tutors themselves, and they'll actually use Wolfram Alpha to show the students all the steps and learn it themselves. So it's a very powerful feature of it. But again, I don't want to focus too much on math because it is such a specific thing. But one last thing I want to mention about working with math in Wolfram Alpha is that you can use plain English if you need to, if you don't know the correct notation. So for instance, I don't know what the correct notation to use for finding the square root of a number is. So I'm just going to type in plain English. What is the square root of 81, for example? And then I'll hit enter. And we see that it interprets our input as square root of 81, which is exactly what we wanted, and gives us the result, which is of course 9, and then the same type other types of information that we saw before. So that's that's a good example of using plain English language query. Now it is English only. They have not included any other languages in Wolfram Alpha yet, although they have made it appear that they're working on it. They've talked a little bit about using other languages, so that's something that may change in the future. But right now it's English only, and I would say that it's very English-centric. When you search for things, of course, it's almost always going to assume that you're referring to the English words because that's all it supports. But it also tends to be a little U.S.-centric as well, in the sense that sometimes when you search for things and you don't specify anything, for instance, the country you're concerned with, a lot of times it will default to the United States, although sometimes it can figure out where you're at and give you an answer based on your geographic location. So we'll see that later on when we do some more queries. So again, that was all the math I want to go over because there's so many more interesting things that Wolfram Alpha does cover. So, for example, let's talk about maybe some general history or government. For instance, who was the 21st president of the United States? So again, that's just a normal general query or general English language query, and it comes back and interprets it as United States President 21st. So that it strips out all the extra words, and that's what it interprets it as, and it gives us the result of Chester A. Arthur, which of course is true, and gives us a lot of other information about that particular president. It also gives us some information about the sequence of presidents to kind of give us some context. And then down below, we've got some personal information about Chester Arthur and then a timeline. Now, one thing I do want to point out on this is, in addition to all this information that I previously have discussed, if you look down at the very bottom, there's a couple other links that are very useful. For instance, it gives us a source information link. And when I click on that, it brings up a dialog box that lists information about the sources that were used to compute this answer. So in this case, they consider themselves, Wolfram Alpha, their knowledge base, to be the primary source. So if you're using this data, you can cite them as the primary source. However, they also give you information about the background sources that were used. In other words, the sources that Wolfram Alpha got their data from. Now, there's a lot of different sources here that they cite for this particular query. So in reality, they actually were able to get this information from many different sources, and they give you a list of many of the potential sources they use. Now, Wolfram Alpha, or Wolfram Research, the company, they curate all the data that's in their knowledge base. So what's interesting about that is that it's something completely different than what say Google will do with their search engine, whereas they're just using information that's out there and leading you to it. Well, Wolfram Alpha does something a little differently, where they actually go out and they find information that's publicly available. It may be in publicly available on the web is one possibility, but also they'll actually work with different organizations to get customized data for their knowledge base. And they go through and they test it, and they develop algorithms that allow you to search it and use it. And that's really where the power of Wolfram Alpha comes in, because they're combining, literally thousands of sources of data into one query engine that you can use to find an answer to a particular question. So, and as I scroll down again, you see that there's lots of sources that they use, and from a couple different points of view, they have both country data and also leader data. There's two different sets of data they use. So I'll close that source information box. Now, there's a question there about what if there's conflicting information from different sources. Now, that's something that, I really can't answer how they handle it. What I can say is I personally have not come across a factual error while using Wolfram Alpha, and I do use it quite a bit. Because it is curated, they literally do, keep a pretty close eye on all the data that's put in their database. So my guess is that if they find any kind of conflicts, that they are going to consider one of them invalid data and not use that data in their knowledge base. But they don't really talk about a whole lot about how they actually do that, behind the scenes there. But there is a whole FAQ that they have that has lots of information about how they go about getting data, how you maybe even can contribute your own data, which is something interesting, which I've never tried to do. So if you're an expert on some particular subject or have some unique source of data, that's something you may want to consider. But as far as I know, they just handle that all themselves as far as determining what data is valid and what is not before they put it in their knowledge base. Okay, now just to the right of the source information, we see there's an option to download as PDF and as Live Mathematica. Now, I don't use the Mathematica software, so I'm not going to discuss that too much or at all, really. But it does allow you, if you click on that link, it will allow you to download basically the information here into Mathematica so you could then use it. But again, I don't use Mathematica and not really know very little about it, so I'm not going to talk about that at all. However, what I find really useful is the download as PDF option. Now, I'm not going to click on that right now just because I don't know how it's going to handle this particular one on this computer and during this webinar. But what it normally would do is it would actually create a PDF document of the content of this query. So whatever the results of this query are, it would create a PDF document that you can then take that PDF and use it however you want. It's an easy document to print out and give as a handout to students. It's also something you could easily save to and link, save on the web and link to it from your website or from your course management system such as Blackboard. You can certainly upload the PDF document directly up to Blackboard or something like that. So that's a pretty useful feature, although they consider it experimental. So I've noticed that I've occasionally had trouble. I'll click on the link and it won't actually successfully create the PDF. But generally, if I just go back and do it again, it works the second time around. So I wouldn't, I don't worry about it too much. But I imagine that over time they will fix any little bugs with that PDF option. But it's something I find very useful, but it is actually fairly new for Wolfram Alpha. And that's the cool thing about Wolfram Alpha also, is that they are constantly adding new features and new data. So it can be used, for many, many things now, but as time goes on, it will be used for more and more. We have another question here about whether it would work in Moodle. Yeah, absolutely. It creates just a normal PDF document. So really, any place you can normally upload any other document, you should be able to upload this. These particular documents should be pretty straightforward. Okay. So let's go on to a couple other examples to kind of give you a real idea of how you can do queries successfully. Now, one thing that you can do here is certainly search for information about a specific country. For instance, I'm going to do a search for life expectancy. So here's just another example of a whole different topic that you can get information on. This would be kind of a health and medicine kind of thing, I suppose. So life expectancy, and I'll just put in the U.S. and hit enter to do the search. And so it gives me a very specific assumption here. It tells me that it's assuming life expectancy is referring to life expectancy data. And if you want to use as referring to countries instead, you can click on a link and it would change the way it's interpreted. But in this case, it obviously has it correct. So when it says use as referring to countries, I'm not even sure exactly what it means there. But I know that I do mean life expectancy, and it sees that. So then it gives me my input interpretation, which is life expectancy, country, United States. And then the result. So the life expectancy of the United States is 77.89 years. And then it gives me a bunch of other information here, like, for instance, survival probability, and even gives me a survival analysis chart here, and a whole bunch of other information. Now, this is an example of a very simple query, but what if I want to compare and contrast the life expectancy of other countries? Well, I can actually literally just type in a comma-separated list of the countries. So let's say I want to now add Sweden and Japan to the list, and I'll hit enter. So with just this minor modification of that query, I now have 3 different countries included, and you can see in the results it gives me separate results for each country. So that's something that's pretty useful there, where you can easily compare multiple pieces of data, and then it ranks them in the order in the order of the life expectancy, and gives me a bunch of other demographic information as well. Now, suppose that you want to share this information with your students. This is a question that came up before about how easy is it to share with Twitter or Facebook or something like that. Well, it's actually very easy to share this Wolfram Alpha data in various ways. I already mentioned that you can use the download as PDF option, which as far as I know, there's always going to be that link down at the bottom there. Now, another thing you can do is you can just share a link directly to a particular query. And so, for instance, if I want to have somebody click on a link that would take them to this exact query, life expectancy, U.S., Sweden, Japan, I can literally just copy the URL up in the address bar here and paste that into any place where I can normally paste a link. So it could be in a blog, it could be on your website, it could be within a content management system such as Blackboard or Moodle. It really, any place where you normally can put links, you could certainly paste that link in there. So that's another way of sharing all this information. But there's actually a really cool tool that they just recently added. Over on the right-hand side, you should always see this bookmark and share option over here. And this makes it very easy to share using various methods. So, for instance, I can share with Facebook. I can share it with Twitter. There's Delicious for anybody who uses Delicious, and then there's Dig. Now, those are just four of the more common ones. If I hit the little plus, point at the little plus sign with my cursor over here, I see a whole bunch of other ones that I can share with as well, including email. So if you just want to email a link to this data to somebody, you can certainly do that. And then there's a whole bunch of other places that I can share with. And then to make it even more complete, if I click on the little More button down here now, I now have this gigantic list of social networking sites and other sites that I can post this information to. So it's just a massive list, and I've never even heard of most of these options in this list here. It's so big they actually let you search for the site that you want to share it with. So those are all things that, if you use that particular service, then you should be familiar with how it would work as far as sharing. So for instance, with Facebook, if you share, it's going to post it to your, wall or whatever they call it. Twitter is, it would post an actual tweet with a link to the information. So there's a lot of different ways you can share this data. So I won't actually try sharing anything, but I just want to make sure you see all the different options that you have there. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more about how Wolfram Alpha actually computes the answers to these queries. And the way that it does it really is very advanced, and that's what makes it truly unique. They take their curated data, and then they design various methodologies is the word they use, and lots of algorithms certainly that they use to allow you to be able to query that data. Now, every different source of data they have is going to have different algorithms that can be used to work with it. However, what's great is they allow you to combine things very easily. So, for instance, and I actually haven't even tried this exact one. Let's see how it works out. But I should be able to do a search for life expectancy U.S. minus life expectancy Japan. Or actually, I guess I should have done that backwards, because in fact I know that Japan has a longer life expectancy. But I'll leave that as is. And we'll see if this works like this. Yeah, so that actually did work. So I did that search, life expectancy U.S. minus life expectancy Japan, and not only is it able to find the pieces of information that I previously seen, but it's able to actually basically do mathematical procedures on them. So in this case, I subtracted, and that's true of most of the data that's in their database. You can run mathematical make mathematical equations out of them. So it's kind of a cool thing. Someone mentioned that they had used Wolfram Alpha recently and that the website said it was in beta. I don't know if they consider their actual website or the Wolfram Alpha tool to be in beta any longer. It's been a while, since they consider it beta, but they sometimes do implement certain features that are considered beta. So that maybe that could have been what you saw. Hard to say. I don't know. But oh yeah, there's someone just said that the widget builder is in beta. That's something I haven't gotten to yet, but I will talk about. Okay, so there's a basic example of using arithmetic with data. Okay, so one thing that I want to make sure I show you guys is that there's plenty of ways to find help here on the Wolfram Alpha website. Now I'm going to go back to their home page by just clicking on the home link on the top left there. So it takes me back to the real basic query page. And you'll notice that there's an examples by topic link. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I just want to give you guys an idea of all the different topics that it has information about, it has data on. So we talked about mathematics. It's certainly one of the more common ones used. Statistics and data analysis, physics, chemistry, materials and engineering. So those are all ones that I find most people expect to find information about. Astronomy, the astronomy data in Wolfram Alpha is absolutely amazing for anybody who's into astronomy. So all the sciences really are well represented, as you can see in the list here. But there's a whole bunch of other things that are really useful. For instance, there's the money and finance, which is has lots of information about various companies. You can do a search on the name of a company. It'll give you a lot of financial data, for instance. So that's kind of neat. Back up at the top there, you can do searches on dates and times, places and geography, socioeconomic data. So I just want to make sure you guys understand that really the amount of data that's in there is just mind-boggling. And they claim to actually have more than 1 trillion pieces of data, or data entities, I guess you could say, in their knowledge base. So that's a pretty incredible number there. And then if you click on any of these individual links, so I'll just pick one at random. Let's say health and medicine, for instance. If I click on health and medicine, it'll give me many examples of queries that can be done, on the subject of health and medicine. So that, there's just one example there. So I'm going to go ahead and go back here to the list. So let's take a look at a couple more examples, just kind of give you an idea of more what it can do, and I'll talk a little bit more about the actual results it gives you. So let's go on to something that I kind of find interesting that a lot of people wouldn't expect maybe, is that it has a lot of interesting things about music. So for instance, I can search for a specific note, I'll say F sharp, and hit enter. And it makes the assumption that F sharp is a musical note. And that it's going to use, and then it gives me the option to use F as a variable, which I don't want here. So obviously its first interpretation is correct. It gives me the actual input interpretation. It tells you the exact frequency of that note. And it gives me the notation of that. And what I find really cool, too, is that over on the right-hand side, there's a link that says play sound. And actually, you can play the sound from when you do a search like this, and it will just, play that actual note through your computer speakers or, headphones or whatever. So that's kind of cool. I won't click on it now. And then below that, there's the keyboard location. So it actually shows you where that note is on the keyboard. And then it shows you the F sharp major scale and the F sharp minor scale. So that's a lot of really cool information that you can certainly access, and that's just on one single music note. Now, let's stay on music here, and let's do something a little more complicated. Let's say I want to do specify an actual chord. So I'll say C major 7th chord. And we're going to see it's going to give me very similar information. It gives me the notation. I can play the notes. It gives me the note names. It gives me the keyboard display once again, and I can play the whole chord if I want. Yeah, I don't know that. The reason I haven't been playing the sound is just because I don't know if you guys will hear it. I don't actually even have any speakers hooked up to this computer that I'm using, so I don't know that it would actually work in a way that you would actually hear it. But, it's something that's so easy to try out. When you've got, a chance, just go to Wolfram Alpha, type in, something music related, such as, a chord name or a music note name, and it will play it for you. And it even gives
Give it a try, Chris.
Yeah, okay, I'll give it a try and see what happens.
Well, maybe it's not going to do it. All right.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know what it was going to do.
Yeah.
But
okay.
it is something that does work, and I've certainly used that feature before. Okay. So, I was mentioning that there's a guitar chord voicings it gives you, which is really cool. I play guitar myself, so that's why I've found this pretty useful. And then it lets you, again, it allows you to download a PDF or, do various things with it, share it. So that's a really cool thing about it. Okay, so let's move on from music, and let's just jump to a different topic and talk about a couple other things. One thing that I find really interesting about it is getting into more of a scientific topic. Let's say like biology, for instance. What if I just want to search for something like a really general piece of information, say like total number of vertebrate species? It interprets it as recorded number of living vertebrate species worldwide, and gives me a number of roughly 60,000. Now, I haven't checked that particular number. I'll make the assumption that it's correct here. So that's an example of something more like a very specific thing it's asking for, so it doesn't give any other information. But then I can also type in something like as esoteric as SRC gene. And it'll give me a lot of information here, which is something that, Wolfram Alpha is the only location I know of where you can go to this one place and find all of this varying types of data in one easy to use place. So it makes the assumption that we're talking about a human gene, not a mouse gene. And it gives me the interpretation once again. and then lots of information. And I know nothing about biology, really, so I don't know what most of this means, but I find it really intriguing that all this data is available here. Okay, so I already talked about, presented a lot of examples and talked about the examples that they have here on their website. If you're having any problems using Wolfram Alpha yourself, if you're ever trying things, and I recommend looking at the examples because those are very, very helpful. That tends to be how I learn how to query things the most, because I just look at the examples they already have. Or they say, and this comes from Wolfram Alpha themselves, they say just go ahead and try a query. So that's something that I think is useful information, a useful tip is just try it out. You can try just normal English language queries, and it will strip out anything it doesn't need and tends to give you a pretty good interpretation of it. Now, they have a whole bunch of other tools that you can use to access or query Wolfram Alpha. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Right now, we've been doing all of our queries through just their website. However, there's other things you can do. In fact, if you go to the downloads area, they have a link at the top of their search page that says downloads. From their downloads area, they give lots of other ways you can search. For instance, they have a Windows desktop gadget that will put a little Wolfram Alpha search query right on your Windows desktop. That's pretty cool. I use that sometimes. They also have an Internet Explorer 8 accelerator that allows you to do searches very easily from within Internet Explorer 8. They have various toolbars you can add to different browsers. They have search engine add-ons. In other words, you can actually add it as an option in your browser from the choices of search engines. Let's see. Let me jump down the list here. They have here's the Mac OS X dashboard widget. So they haven't forgot about Mac users. So if you have a Mac, you can certainly put that on your dashboard. So that's something that is just various ways that you can query their search or their query engine without having to use the website itself. And in addition to that, I think somebody mentioned that there's an app for their iPad. I don't have an iPad, but I do have an iPhone, and I have downloaded the iPhone app, and I use it occasionally. I will warn you that their apps are not free. They do charge for their apps. So that's, again, I talked about how, general use of their website is completely free, but that there are other ways that, they do make money, and one of those ways is by selling those specialized apps. I think I want to say I paid like $5 for the iPhone app. I'm assuming it's still around that price. They had actually lowered the price. It had previously been like $40. And I waited till they lowered the price before I bought it myself. But it's something that's there, certainly. Okay, so $1.99, some people are saying. So there you go. I wonder if I could have queried that in Wolfram Alpha. Okay, so those are various ways of accessing it. But, to tell you the truth, generally I just use the Wolfram Alpha website. I have a bookmark to it, and I use that a lot. And they also have what they call widgets. And they're kind of buried on this site right now, but if you go to the more link at the top, they have a link to what they call widgets. And widgets, I want to just demonstrate really quickly what they are. So when I go to their widgets area, basically what a widget is, it's a mini app that you can build. And they say it's really easy to build them. I personally have not built any widgets myself yet, so I can't really speak to how easy it is to do. But it's something that's free for you to do. You can build something like, for example, they have a calorie counter or a calorie calculator that allows you to calculate how many calories you burn if you do a particular type of exercise and so in this case running at a particular speed and distance. It asks you your weight and your sex, and then it will calculate the number of calories you burn. So that's just one example, but there's a whole bunch of them. Let's see if there's any interest in here. Here's a photographer's one. This one allows you to calculate the depth of field. Here we go. That's the depth of field calculation one. There's a balancing chemical equations one here, and these are all ones that somebody else created, other people created that are that people can use. But the cool thing about the widgets is they let you then embed that widget within any website that you want. So if you have your own site, you can just embed that on your website so anybody who browses there can use it without having to actually go to the Wolfram Alpha website. So it's a cool tool. It's kind of an advanced thing, so it's certainly not for everybody. But if you have some specific, specific calculation that you want your students to be able to perform, creating a widget like this could be pretty helpful. Because it basically will just ask them for the exact information necessary to calculate it. Okay. Now, there's a few different sources of getting more information beyond what I can talk about here, so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to go back to the Wolfram Alpha site here. And actually, when I'm on this page here, you can see at the top some of the links that are here actually are links to where you can get some really great information. So besides the examples, there is a general about Wolfram Alpha site, but that just kind of gives real background information about the website and the company, Wolfram Research. But there is an FAQ that has a lot of really helpful information. So if you have any specific questions about how it works, and some of those types of things can be found there, certainly. But there's also a blog that Wolfram Alpha runs, and that's something that I find very useful. What they do with their blog is that anytime they add new sources of data to their knowledge base, they will blog about it. So I recommend, if you're interested in Wolfram Alpha, subscribing to their blog, or at least just checking it out occasionally, because they will tell you anytime they add any new features or new sources of data. And I find it really interesting to see just the breadth of topics that they, or a breadth of data they add on various topics. So it's very useful. And also sometimes they give just tips and tricks on how to use Wolfram Alpha. So it's a very useful thing. And I'll, at the end of this presentation, I'll show you the links that you can use to get directly to the blog and other things I'm talking about, in case you have trouble finding the links. Now, they also have a community area, and I'll go ahead and click on the community link just to show you that this is an area where basically there are discussion forums is the best way of describing them, I guess. So you can view any of their forums about, and sometimes they even have discussions about specific topics. So, for instance, if you're interested in astronomy, they have an astronomy area, and that's very useful as well. One problem with me giving this presentation is I'm not an expert on any one of these disciplines. I'm really just kind of more of a software evangelist. I like to call myself a software tool evangelist. I just want to get the information out there, show you guys what is available out there, give you basic information on how you can use it. But if you want to know how to use it specifically for any particular topic, this is a great resource here, this community area. So I've used it myself a little bit. They also have a tech support forum, which you can certainly use if you're having problems with a specific type of query, or a specific tool that they have, like such as their widgets. That might be a good place to look. And there's a place where you can report bugs. So there's a lot of useful stuff here. Okay, so that's the community. Like I said, it can be pretty useful. I do use it occasionally. Another thing, which I don't know that they have a link to it anywhere on here. It doesn't look like it. But they also have, actually I clicked on that link there. They also have a Wolfram Alpha for educators. And I just happen to know that the website address for it also goes directly to it. But I'll show you guys the link later. But it's easy. It's just wolframalpha.com/educators. Let's see, there's a question there about any problems with Mac or Safari. There really isn't, as far as I know. The software they put out is certainly seems to be focused more on use on Windows, but their website and the widgets and everything seem to work on the Mac OS just fine with using Safari. Okay, but this is the Wolfram Alpha for Educators site. So I would say that my biggest disappointment about this particular site is that it does seem to be really focused on K through 12. Nothing against K through 12, but I come from the higher ed myself, so that's really more and more of my personal interest, or at least my professional interest. But on the other hand, there's a lot of crossover, certainly. And so on the site here, you can see some information on using Wolfram Alpha in the classroom. And they have some cool stuff here. And one of the things I like is they actually have some examples of lesson plans that you can grab. Again, it is very focused on K through 12 right now, but they allow you to submit lesson plan, your own lesson plan. So I would really be interested, it'd be very interesting to see what maybe some of you guys can come up with as far as ways to use Wolfram Alpha, in the classroom and online, of course. But as an example, if I want to view their math lesson plans, they have a lot of stuff here, including some calculus ones. So if I click on a particular one, it should just launch it. I believe they're PDF documents. Luckily, this computer does appear to have Acrobat installed. Okay, yeah. So here's an example of one of the lesson plans that they have up there, and you can see that this person's lesson plan includes actually printouts from the Wolfram Alpha website itself. So that's an example of how again you can certainly create PDF documents of that Wolfram Alpha content. Okay, I'm going to close that. So that's an example of one of their lesson plans. So this is, as Michelle said, this is a great way to get some ideas. So, rather than me try to come up with ideas, on subjects that I'm not very familiar with, this is a good place for you to go and find, information about the specific topics that you teach or that you research. That's the lesson plans area. Okay, and in addition to the lesson plans, they have some other information here, including one thing I didn't mention, actually, in the Wolfram Alpha community that I previously showed you, there actually is an education group that you can actually sign up for or join that, specifically for education. I looked around in there, and there wasn't a whole lot of information that I felt was relevant to my needs personally. A lot of it was K through 12, but it's something to certainly check out. And obviously, the more people that join it, the more activity there is, and the more useful it would be. And then down toward the bottom, they have other information about other Wolfram research sources, not necessarily Wolfram Alpha. So that's the important thing, which I didn't spend a lot of time talking about the terminology. Wolfram Alpha, the reason they use that name, obviously the name of the company is Wolfram Research. It was founded by Stephen Wolfram, so it's just using his name. And why they gave it the Alpha name, I don't know specifically. But it is a very new type of tool. So in a sense, there's nothing really like it. So it is kind of the alpha, that breed of tool. So they give information, give you a link to the Wolfram Education Portal, which is going to have information for Wolfram Alpha users as well as Mathematica users and other Wolfram research products. So there's a lot of information there. Last year, I believe it was in October of 2009, they had what they called the Wolfram Alpha Homework Day, and they actually had a bunch of live video and then later put them online recordings of them of young students using Wolfram Alpha, and it was pretty interesting because it showed the instructors certainly using the lesson plans, but what I was really struck by was how quickly the younger students, and I'm talking really young, like I'm talking like under 10 years old, were using Wolfram Alpha, and they seemed to really dig it. So it's something that that I found surprising, but then again, these kids are growing up using computers, so I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. Okay, so that's again another source of information. Oh, I do see that. Yeah, under the More menu, they do have an education link there. Now there are a couple of things which I want to talk about real quickly, but they're kind of getting into the more of the advanced things, so I won't spend too much time on them. But on their More menu is a link to Web Service API. So I'll click on that just real quick. But what that is if you are interested in developing your own custom tools, and this would be something that's more complicated than what you might be able to do with the widgets that were there. But if you're interested in developing your own, more complicated programs or more tools using it, they have this API that you can use. However, it does cost money. So there's a whole pricing and registration thing you have to go through. I won't bother going over that now because probably very few of you would ever want to get this far on it. But just to give you general information, and actually all the technical specifications are over here on the right-hand side spelled out pretty well for anybody that would be interested in something like this. But it offers lots of different types of programming languages that can use the API. So that's pretty well covered. And there have been some really well-known apps that use it. One thing I'll point you, one real big user of it is actually Microsoft's Bing search engine. I don't know if any of you have used Bing, B-I-N-G, but they have actually integrated the Wolfram Alpha API into their search engine. So when you do searches using Bing, sometimes it actually is giving you a factual answer in the same way that that Wolfram Alpha does. It's just getting the same data, so it should give you the same answer, of course. But that's something that is a really high-end application. But for example, if somebody wanted to create an application that allowed students to be able to input all of the things that they ate on a particular day, and then submit that and give a total calorie count and nutrition breakdown, they could make an app that does something like that. That's just kind of one of just one example of something you could do. So that gets, that's if you're getting more complicated than just what the simple widgets can do. But you can actually do that sort of thing using the widgets in a lot of cases. So this again is just if you do need to do more than what the simple widgets can do.
Hey Chris, do you want to take a couple questions?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, Roxanne wants to know what's your sense of how open instructors would be to allowing students to, cite Wolfram Alpha in their research papers, and is it recognized?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to say. Because right now I've talked to so few instructors that actually either are using it themselves or have their students using it as far as they know. I just haven't had talked to enough people to get a good sense of what's currently going on. But again, as I mentioned before, Wolfram Alpha considers themselves to be a primary source, so I would personally consider it perfectly acceptable to cite Wolfram Alpha as a source of data, and there's no reason why you as an instructor can't go to Wolfram Alpha and confirm that yourself. So that's certainly something they could use it for. But one thing is, and this kind of actually goes along with the question that was just asked about what about scientific or academic questions with a genuine lack of expert consensus. Well, if it's not an actual factual query, in other words, if there is no single answer, it's not going to be able to give you it's not going to attempt to give you an answer. It really does only compute factual answers. So really, I saw someone before asked about what about philosophical questions? Well, they will not ever address that type of a thing, or that type of a question. They say very, very clearly, and this is the exact words that Wolfram Alpha uses. They say that it's limited to, let's see. Well, I thought I had it in my notes here, but I don't. Yeah, okay. They say it deals only with facts, not opinions. So if something is considered a fact, it will certainly deal with it. But yeah, that's a good question though, because there's obviously lots of things that would be considered fact by many people, and not a fact by others. There's certainly controversies like that within science, absolutely. And I would say that Wolfram Alpha probably just isn't going to even give you an answer for those types of things. But, that's something that would be interesting to certainly try out, something that you believe to be, a factual thing that other people may not agree on, there's no consensus on. But I would say that the way that it works tends to avoid those kinds of problems. But again, it's hard to say, but I have yet to come across anybody who has any real complaints about factual inaccuracies within Wolfram Alpha. So they seem to be doing a very, very good job of curating their data and only giving answers to factual questions. Did you see any other questions that people might have?
Let's see. There was a question about trying to embed widgets within Blackboard or Moodle, but you might have already talked about that.
Yeah, I didn't mention specifically with widgets, but I haven't actually tried it, to tell you the truth. I haven't used their widgets very much. They're a fairly new thing. They haven't had around for too long. So I haven't tried creating my own widget or embedding a widget. However, I would expect that it would work pretty easily in any normal course management system such as Blackboard or Moodle. It should be pretty standard. Generally, if the software allows you to embed any other types of objects, I don't see why it wouldn't allow you to embed Wolfram Alpha objects.
Okie doke. I think that's it so far.
Okay. All right. So I'll just go ahead and talk about a couple other little things, give a couple other little examples of things that I find really interesting that it can do. And then I'll go ahead and just switch, go to kind of question and answer mode and see what happens. And we should be able to finish up, definitely on time here by 2:30. Okay, so some of the interesting ones I want to talk about that I didn't talk about before because I just wasn't sure if I was going to have time. Let me give an example. So let's talk about chemistry for a little while here. I can type in the name of a particular well, there's a lot of things I can do, but I can actually name a particular compound or a molecule. For instance, okay, let's say I'll just type in NO2 and hit enter. And so it interprets it as nitrogen dioxide, which of course in this case is correct, and gives me the formula and the name of it. But another really cool thing is it actually does also give me the actual structure of it here. And lots of other information which I won't get into. So there's an example of a simple molecule like that. However, I can type in very complicated ones as well. So again, I'm not a chemist by any means. But here's an example of a much more complicated one. So it sees that it's isobutyl chloride, and again gives me the structure diagram and all the other information about that particular chemical name. And then I'll go into something a little more advanced. So this is something that I thought was kind of cool. So I want to query about radioactive decay. But when you have a question about something as specific as this, you need to give it some information. So I'm going to say time equals 50 years and half-life equals, let's say, 30 years. And this is, again, getting very specific on a particular topic. So for most of you, you may not care about this type of thing. But it gives you, again, the interpretation and then the results. So the remaining fraction is going to be 31.5% after 50 years. So that's something that's, again, these are things that I find it absolutely amazing that you can do all of these things within one, with one tool. I find that just absolutely amazing. Okay. Now, I already demonstrated doing searching for specific things such as who was the 21st president of the United States. But another thing you can do is kind of reverse that and search dates. I find the information that it has about specific dates really interesting. So, for instance, what if I want to know who was president? And I'll say of the U.S. to be specific. And let's say August, 15th, and 1952. And it will come back. It should come back with the answer. There we go. So again, this is combining two different sources of data, both information about the U.S. presidents and about dates, and it gives me the answer as Harry S. Truman, and all the normal supporting stuff. Now, what if I ask it something that really isn't even valid? For instance, who was president of Canada on August 15th, 1952? So this is one that I would fully expect to not work because Canada doesn't have a president. Now, here is where it gets a little dicey. We see a problem here because it's assuming president of the United States, in my opinion, I would say that Wolfram Alpha should probably give you the answer of saying something like not valid or there is no president of Canada, something like that. But it doesn't work. So that's, there are times when you're going to come across something like this. And I just want to make sure I point out that there are problems with certain queries like this. However, you need to, as long as you pay attention to the input interpretation, it should be very obvious that that is a problem. So in this case, clearly I was not doing anything related to the United States. Question here, do quotes help? I found that sometimes using quotes or even, well, not quotes, but I found sometimes using parentheses in queries can be very helpful. So anybody that's familiar with, mathematical notation, parenthetical notation would be familiar with that. And that can work on all kinds of data. So sometimes, sometimes you might want to try encapsulating things in parentheses. And in this case, I don't know if, using quotation marks around any particular part of this query would necessarily work. We'll see what this does. But what I do know is that I can easily solve the problem by asking a valid question. And, because I'm not too worried about the wrong answer it gave me because it really wasn't a valid question. But on the other hand, if I were to search for who was Prime Minister, of Canada, oops. And this one should return back a correct answer. There we go. So in this case, yeah. So it was just a matter of giving it a valid question, and it was able to give the answer. Now, you're also able to shorten questions quite a bit. I asked a normal English language query, but what I could have done is I could have typed in something as short as Prime Minister, Canada, and then shouldn't even need any of those extra words or anything. So I'm just going to type in Prime Minister, Canada, August 15th, 1952, and I believe this query will work. Yeah, works perfectly fine. So it's something that as you use it, you get used to the types of questions you can use. But I personally, usually just if I'm in doubt, I just use an English language query, and it seems to work pretty well. Let's see. So a couple questions here. How about Boolean operators? As far as I know, I believe it does support Boolean operators, although I don't recall ever actually using one myself, so that may or may not be true, but I think it does support them. But that's something I don't want to say absolutely for sure. Let's see, does it work well as a dictionary, including slang? It actually has some very interesting things with the way you can work with words. And in fact, let me talk about that a little bit. Let's go to the examples area. There's a whole words and linguistics area. And I don't know if it includes anything with slang or anything like that. But what I have found is there's a lot of really interesting information that's in there. So for instance, if you type the word word and then a word after it, it will give you many properties of that particular word. Now, you would have to type word march here for it to work, because if you just type the word march itself, it's going to give you a different interpretation than believe. In this case, I think it might assume that you mean the calendar month of March. Now, I'm just assuming that, but this makes it more specific. But it gives me a lot of information about that specific word. So for one thing is I certainly could use it as a dictionary if I wanted to. I personally don't do that because so many of the search engines work pretty well as a dictionary. But this actually is kind of neat what it does here. And it actually does display it in a very easy-to-read format, which I do like. But it can be a little slower sometimes, giving you all the results. It gives you the pronunciation, gives you really information about the first known use of it in English language. So there's a lot of really cool information here, synonyms. And so, I find that really cool. And I actually do occasionally when I'm doing some kind of linguistic search, I do use Wolfram Alpha as my main source of information. I really like it for that. Let me go back here. If all you're looking for is just a definition of a word, you can just type in define, triangulate, for instance, or define and whatever the word is, and that will give you a little less information. It'll give you specifically the definition, and that's it. Yeah, and there's a lot of other cool things here. The word puzzles for any Scrabble players. This is probably the best online tool that I've seen. You can type in the word Scrabble and then a word, and it actually calculates the actual score that it's worth. But even better for Scrabble players is you can just type in a bunch of letters. And I thought it had an example here somewhere. It might have been under a different category. But you can actually type in just a series of letters, and give you a list of all the words you can form from those letters. So that's kind of a cool one. If you're just looking for anagrams, there's an easy way to do that, of course. And it says it has information about languages, but again, it is very English-centric, and there really is no support for other languages at this point in time. So if you do a search for, when it talks about using languages, or at least data about languages, it really is data about the languages. So for instance, if I do a search for Mandarin language, then it gives me information about the total number of speakers of that language, the total number of native speakers, where the most of the speakers come from, and all of that. So that's a lot of really cool information there, and even a map. And this is really cool, and this is something we hadn't seen, I don't think, in any of my previous queries. It gives you a map here that shows where all these speakers of Mandarin are at. So we could see, obviously there's many of them are in China, as well as other areas of Asia, and then there's a lot of them in the United States, Canada, and Australia as well. Okay, so let's see. There's a question. I don't know. Someone mentioned that there's a widget for Scrabble. Yeah, absolutely. That would be a perfect use of a widget. Maybe next time I'll do a whole workshop just on using it for Scrabble. That seems to be interesting to people. And there's a whole bunch of other really cool things you can do with linguistics, but I'm not a linguist by any means. So that's just an example of that. Let's see. There's so many different topics we could certainly discuss. Oh, here's something I'll demonstrate. It has weather information, but this is a good way of demonstrating how it calculates your geographic location. So I'm just going to type in the word weather and run the query. And once it's done giving the results, so what it's doing is it interpreted it as the word weather, which of course is what exactly I put in. And then it's giving me the latest record weather for Escondido, California. Now the reason it's doing that is because I'm actually located in San Marcos, California right now, which is right next to Escondido. In fact, I'm probably literally within a mile of the border of Escondido. So it's doing a pretty good job of calculating where I'm coming from. Now, I assume that it's doing that based on the internet service provider I'm using, and where it's being routed, to and from, all that information. And that's pretty common with other websites. A lot of websites nowadays are able to calculate, roughly where you're at based on just the internet connection you're using. Now, what if I don't want to have, to see the weather in my local area? Well, it's as easy as typing, weather in, say, Tokyo, for instance. And now we're going to get information specifically for Tokyo. So, it's very easy to find, information about specific areas around the world. And it just really has an incredible amount of data. And the data is generally absolutely up to date, especially with something like this. It's accurate, it's current data. Whereas some types of data you might have to pull from, older information. So, for instance, when I was doing the searches on life expectancy, it actually was pulling a lot of that information from, 2005, 2008, just depends on what country's, information I was searching for. So that's something to certainly, keep in mind. Certain types of data are going to be absolutely up to date, and then other types of data are going to be just whatever the most recent data they have is from. So that's, this example of geolocation within here. And, just checking on this topic real quick, and the weather topic, there's also it also has information about hurricanes. So, for instance, if I want to search for Hurricane Katrina, then I can, it knows exactly what I'm talking about. It knows what Hurricane Katrina is. It tells you the dates that it was around, the duration of it, the max wind speed. gives me a little a graphic showing the path of the hurricane. So that's, again, there's kind of really cool information, things that you may not think to come to Wolfram Alpha to search for. And there's also some interesting Easter eggs within Wolfram Alpha. And by Easter egg, I mean little kind of fun things. Like, for instance, let's see if this one's still in here. If you search for what is the meaning of life, and it comes back as it interprets my question as answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, and the result is 42. And then it tells me that is, of course, from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams' novel. Absolutely. So, yeah, that's it has a lot of little cool things like that I've come across. But that's just kind of a little fun thing for Douglas Adams fans, of course. I think there's still a lot of you out there. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much does it. We've got another 15 minutes to just kind of answer questions if anybody has them. Again, I'm not really a subject, expert on any of these things. But, I do use the Wolfram Alpha tool a lot. So if anybody has any questions, I can certainly give it a try while we're still here in Wolfram Alpha. And then I just want to make sure that you guys know how to get, how to get to Wolfram Alpha. So we've already given out that address, the www.wolframalpha.com. That's all you have to do. I mentioned the blog and the Wolfram Alpha for educators, as well as the community area. So those are all very useful. So I absolutely encourage you guys to try it out. That's in my opinion, the best way to learn it is to just try doing queries in Wolfram Alpha, and then if you're having trouble, look at the examples. Either one of those ways works really well.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? If you want to type them in the chat.
Yeah, you guys are absolutely welcome. Let me let's see if I
more information. You want to talk about that, Chris?
Yeah. So this is what I just wanted to just talk about how I mentioned the blog. I find the blog absolutely essential for learning what kinds of things get added to Wolfram Alpha. So honestly, it might if you didn't follow their blog and they added new data, there's really no other way to know about it. So I definitely recommend subscribing to their blog. It's very helpful. And then of course the Wolfram Alpha for educators that I mentioned, that's a pretty helpful site. And I'm hoping that we'll see in the future some more content specifically for higher education. Because right now, like I said, most of it is K through 12 content. And then of course there's my information there. You are absolutely welcome to email me or call me. If you have questions about Wolfram Alpha, definitely email me, and I'll get back to you. And any questions you have, maybe I'll even post them on my blog, which I didn't put a link to my blog here. But I do have a blog. I call it the Monkey Wrench, and it's just a site that I use, to kind of help spread information about these various tools. And the blog address is just themonkeywrench.wordpress.com. So that's something you can certainly check out. But you're absolutely welcome to email me with questions.
And I mentioned it was monkeywrench.
themonkeywrench.wordpress.com.
Okay, I'll send that on out there. Well, thanks, Chris. We really appreciate it. I think everybody got a lot of great information and definitely the wow factor. And please, like Chris said, you can give him a contact or certainly contact us here at CCC Confer, and we can hook you up with Chris. And we really appreciate him being a good sport. I think the last time he gave this class, you have 3 or 4 people attending, so this is so many more people. Yeah, it's awesome. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for attending. Really appreciate it. If you have any kind of comments or any other topics that you would like to hear, have us get speakers about, please let us know. We're being client services at cccconfer.org.